let's move on to the podcast page. So back in Sublime Text, let's go under the podcast.fm directory and create a new file and save this as podcasts.html. Then I'm going to copy the HTML structure from the body up and then paste that in. Then let's add a closing body tag and a closing HTML tag. And I'm just going to say h1, this works. And then go to, instead of index.html, we'll do /podcasts.html. Okay, this works. So everything is good to go. So the first thing we need to do, let's copy the header. The structure is going to stay the same, but we are going to add a ID to it to change the colors of it, because on the home page, if we go back, this is white text, obviously, and we don't want it to be white because it's going to be on a white background, so we'll need a darker color for the font. So let's go back. All right, so we copied the header in. We're going to keep the class of ClearFix, but we're going to add an ID of main header. Then everything else will stay the same. Cool. And then next we want the banner. So back in our design, we have the banner with discover your new favorite podcast. So let's add that. Let's add a div with an ID of banner. And then inside of here, let's add an h1 tag and say discover your new favorite podcast. We're putting this in an h1 tag because it's going to be the top heading. So next, let's go back and for our podcasts, if we go back to our design, we're going to loop through all the podcasts and then we're going to have it inside of a wrapper. So let's start that. Let's do an ID of podcasts and add a class of ClearFix. And then inside of here, let's add a .wrapper. Okay, so each of the podcast episodes, we're going to make this a list, and each one is going to be a list item. And then we're going to style it to look like this. So let's begin. Let's do a UL, and then each one's going to have an A tag around it to go to the actual podcast page. So I'm going to do an A, and then I'm just going to stub it out for now. And then inside of here, we'll do an LI, and I'll just put a H2 for now. Say like Narwhal's podcast, and then the episode count, we'll do a P tag with the episode count class, and I'll just say 1 episode. So I'm going to save that, go back, refresh. So we got the H1 and then the list below that inside of the wrapper. So off camera, I've went ahead and added the images that we're going to use from the design back in Photoshop, the cover images, and then a few of the episode images. So I added that into the podcast and then /images folder, as you can see. So next thing we want to do is inside of the LI, I want to have an image. So we'll add an image tag source. We'll go to /images, and I'll just say narwhals.jpg. And the alt will be Narwhal's podcast. And then I also want to wrap this content in a div to style this separately from the image. So I'm going to call this podcast overview. Overview. And then let's bring this content up in here like so. So if we go back and refresh, you can see the image is showing up, the title, and it's all clickable. It goes nowhere right now because it's just stubbed out. But let's start styling this. So we have a link to the application.css. What we are going to do is create a new file and call this podcasts .css or SCSS. And then inside of our application.scss, let's go down the bottom and below home, let's do @import podcasts. Save that. All right, and let's bring the podcasts over here, close out of the home, close out of the application, and the index. Let's just have the podcast.html and the podcast.scss open. So first, let's style the banner. You know what? Actually, let's open up the application.scss. We're going to have the banner on more than one page, and it's all going to be styled different. The only difference between them is going to be the text and the image we're using for the background. So how we're going to do this is below the buttons, let's add new class. Actually, you know what? I'm forgetting a big step. Let's style the main header. So I'm going to add a class of main header. Inside of here, let's make the color dark, background of white, and then padding, let's make 2.5 rem and 0. So 2.5 on top and bottom and 0 on left and right. So that's looking good. Now let's style the logo. We can actually copy it from, let's go back to the home.css. I'm going to copy the logo and the nav styles, and then I will paste those in and we'll tweak them as needed. Tab that over, go back and refresh. All right, so the color is currently white. So let's be sure to change that to dark. Now if we go back and refresh, all right, that's looking pretty good. Let me zoom in a bit for you guys to see better. Okay, so you can see the header is now styled. Let's take care of the banner. If we go back to our Photoshop file, we need to export this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the hit M, grab the marquee tool, and then I'm going to select just the banner. I'm going to hit C and I'm going to crop it. And let's bring the crop up just a tiny bit. Let me zoom in so we don't have that white border on the bottom. Okay, so let's save this as is. 2880 is far too large, so let's make it 1500. And then again, let's make it a JPEG and try to get the file size down as much as possible. So we want it to be as small as possible without losing quality. So usually around 75–80% is where you want to go. If you can get it smaller than that, then that is awesome. 72 looks okay, and it's at 65 kilobytes, so let's use that. We'll save that into our directory and images folder. I've already got it here, so I'm just gonna keep it as is, but go ahead and save that and then hit Option Command Z a few times to undo what you just did, and then deselect with Command D to get rid of that marquee. And then we can bring back the text. Okay, so what you want to do, let's go ahead and style that banner. So we'll do ID of banner, and then the banner has a background image, URL /images, and then the file name is podcast banner.jpg or whatever you just called it, and then colon, save that and go back and refresh. You can see the image is showing up, but you can see it doesn't go full width and it's repeating, so that's no good. So what we are going to do is background repeat, no repeat. Background size, we're going to do cover so that it goes full width and height. Background position, we're going to do center and center. So it's going to center it vertically and horizontally. And that's another great thing about CodeKit. It will tell you if you mess up and have a syntax error because it can't compile it. So let's see what I did wrong. Background cover expected. Oh, okay. Background cover should actually be background size cover. There we go. Okay, so next what we want to do is target that H1, and we're going to do text align center. Go back, refresh. See the text is now centered. Let's change the color to white. Let's make it a font size of 3 rem. Font weight, let's make it light, so 300. Now font size is bigger and font weight is skinnier. Let's do the letter spacing, 1 pixel. Let's make a margin of 0. And then obviously we want this to be fairly large. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a padding of 4 rem 0. So padding on top and bottom. That's actually pretty small still, so I'm going to try 8 rem. Perfect. So you can see the padding up here works. This looks good. And then I don't want this to be pushing, or I don't want the podcast to be pushing right up against it. So on the banner, let's go back up out of the div, or out of the H1, and then I'm going to do margin bottom 4 rem. So now that pushes down the podcast a bit. I'm going to tweak how this is set up though. Since the banner is going to be on multiple pages, we don't want to use the same image for each one. So I'm going to copy this background image line, delete it, and then I'm going to make a specific class for each page. So podcast banner, let's paste that in. So if I save that and then go back to podcast.html, let's add a class of podcast banner. Refresh, you can see everything is still the same. But now we'll be able to add a new one for the sign up pages or the sign in page, etc. Okay, so next let's style the podcast. So let's go back to Sublime Text and let's go to the podcast.scss. So we have a podcast ID. So let's do ID of podcasts. First thing, let's do a padding bottom of 3 rem. That way when we scroll to the bottom, it's not just pushed right up against it. So if I refresh, now there's 3 rem of padding on the bottom. Perfect. Okay, so now let's grab the UL. Let's do a list style of none to remove the bullet points. Padding left of none and a margin of 0. Or padding left of 0, I'm sorry. Now if we go back, refresh, you can see the padding's gone. The list style, or the bullet points are gone as well. Now let's do the LI. So back in our Photoshop file, we have 4 columns. So in order to do that, we are going to make each LI 23%. We're going to do a width of 23%. We're going to float each one of them left, and then we're going to do a margin of 0, 1%, 2 rem on the bottom, and then 1%. And then let's grab the image and let's make it a width 100% and a max width of 100%. So if I save that, go back and refresh, you can see it's now 23% of the viewport. And we can test that by copying from the ahref, to the closing href. Let's copy that. Whoops. Let's copy and paste that, say 5 times. Refresh. There we go. So each one is 23%. There's a margin. I can show you what it does if I get rid of the margin. You can see everything's pushed up against one another, so definitely want to keep that. All right, so back in our design, we have the background of white with the box shadow. So let's add that. So to do the box shadow, let me show you a pretty cool resource called css3generator.com. Then you can click choose something, and they have all sorts of different stuff you can do. So let's click box shadow, inset no. We're going to do vertical length of 0. We want it 1 pixel down. Blur radius, let's do 1 pixel. Spread, we'll do 0. Color type, we're going to do RGBA. And then let's do a black color, which is 000. And then we can do the opacity. RGBA then stands for red, green, blue, and then A is alpha. So the opacity of that color. So let's do 0.25, and then it prints out the code we need. So let's copy that, go back and paste that in. Now if we go to our podcast, refresh, beautiful. So now each box has a box shadow. And then remember before we put each the podcast content into a podcast overview div. The reason we did that is because when we put padding around here, we didn't want it to be around the image. We want the image to be full width and then the padding to be around the content only. So let's style that. Go under the image. Let's do podcast overview. Let's do a padding, say 1 rem and 7.5%. Now go back and refresh. Looking good. Now let's do H2, and we'll do a margin 0. Let's make the font size 1 rem. Let's do the font weight and make it bold, so 700. And the color, let's do the dark variable. Go back, refresh. Perfect. Makes it smaller. Then let's do the episode count. Remember, it's the episode count class. So get out of the H2 and do .episode count. Let's do a color of lighten. Yeah, just like darken, we can do lighten. And then we'll pick the dark color. And let's say 25%. So let's see how that looks. That looks pretty good, but we could probably go a bit more, maybe 40%. Let's try 50. That looks good. Now I want this to be a bit smaller, so let's make it font size of 0.9 rem. And let's do a margin of 0 or 0.5 on the top rem, 0 on the right, and then 0.25 on the bottom, and then 0. Go back, refresh. Beautiful. That's looking great. Let's add a border radius to the box and the images as well. So if we go up to the LI under the box shadow, let's add a border radius. And I'm going to say 0.35 rem, 35 rem all around. Go back and refresh. You can see the bottom now has a border bottom, but the top does not, and that's because the image is on top of the box and it does not have that border radius. So what we're going to do is style it so the images have a top, left, and right border radius of 0.35 rem. So let's go inside the image and do a border radius, and we'll do 0.35 rem, 0.35 rem, and 0, 0. And the reason we're doing it like this as opposed to border radius on all sides is because we want the bottom to have no border radius, but the top to be slightly rounded. All right, this is looking great, guys. So I'm gonna go ahead and change the different images. So I'm gonna go back to this. Let me change one to the Sean West. Refresh. believe the other one was rocket ship. Nope. Oh, let me change the alt tag as well. Sean West podcast. Let me go to the images and see what we have. We have narwhals, rocketship.png. That's what it was. Not JPG but instead PNG. And I'll say rocket ship podcast. And then let's also do startup_school. Cool, this is coming along, guys. I'm liking this. So let's add a hover state. So when you select it, it'd be cool if you could tell when you're hovering on top of each podcast. So let's style it to do that. So inside of the LI, let's get out of the podcast overview. We'll do and hover for the hover state. And then let's target the image by doing image, and we'll drop the opacity of the image to 0.8. So now when we go back and refresh, when we hover over it, you can see the opacity drops slightly. Perfect. And now get out of the image and let's grab the podcast overview. Whoops. Overview. And then inside of here, let's select the H2 and let's do a color, and we'll change it from the dark color to a color of highlight. So now when we go back and refresh, the podcast title and the image change. Perfect. That looks awesome. So the next thing we need to do is style or create the pagination. So let's go back to our podcast.html, and then outside of the podcast div, let's line up and get out of there. Let's create a new div with the class of pagination. When we get to creating our Rails application, we're going to use a gem called will paginate for the pagination. So I'm using the class names that will paginate uses by default. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a span tag with class of previous page and disabled. Whoops, dot disabled. And then I'll say previous. Then inside of here, I'll do an m tag and add a m.current, class of current. And I'll say 1, a href equals, stub it out for now. And then I'll say 2 and close that. And then I'll do another a with the class of next page, next underscore page. And then href equals stub, close it and say next, and then close that. So now if we go back and refresh, you can see at the bottom, the previous and next is showing up. So let's go ahead and style that, style the pagination. We're going to use pagination on more than one page. Let's add it to the application.scss file. We'll say dot pagination :before and dot pagination :after. We're going to do a quick clear fix. We'll do content space and then display of table, and then dot pagination after. Let's do clear both. All right, so now let's grab the pagination class, dot pagination. So let's do text align center to get it to show up in the center. Whoops. Center of the page. Then let's do a margin of 2rem 0. So add some spacing out around it. And then let's select the a tag, the dot previous page, dot current, and dot next page classes. So I'm just going to go through and add all the styling for this, we're going to do a padding of 0.75 rem and 1 rem. Margin, we'll do 0 and 0.25 rem on left and right. We'll do border radius of 0.15 rem. Do a line height of 1.25. Text decoration, none. Decoration. To get rid of the underline, we're going to do a background color of a light gray. EDEFF5 for the hex value. Then we'll do a font weight of 700 to make it bold. Font size we'll do pretty small, 0.7 rem. Color we'll do dark. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. So you can see each one has a background. So that looks pretty great. One thing that's bugging me is it's pushed up right up against the bottom. So let's change the margin of the pagination from, I don't think we need 2 rem. Let's do 1 rem on top, 0 on the left, and let's do 5 rem on the bottom. Okay, and now let's add a current class as we have styled here. So let's go down, let's do .current. We'll do a background of the highlight color, and let's do a color of white. Looks good. Let's also add a font style of normal. And this is because by default will paginate adds the current in a M class, which is italic. So this will remove the italic and override the will paginate styles. And then finally, let's add a disabled class, disabled, to style the previous button or the next button when there is no previous or next. So let's do color, and we're going to do hex C0, 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 which is a very light gray. So if we go back and refresh, you can see it's a very light gray. And then let's also add a hover state for it, and hover, and let's make the color the same. So I'm just going to go up and copy. That way it doesn't change when we hover over it. So now let's add a hover state to each button and hover. Let's do a background of highlight and a color of white. So now when we hover over, let's fix that. We don't want it to change the background color when we hover over it. So let's copy the background. Let's copy the background color, and then in the disabled class, hover, let's add the background color. That way it stays the same when you hover over it. Perfect. So that looks really good. Okay, so in the next step, we will style the podcast show page.